All right, the Democratic Alliance leader Mmusi Maimane is outlining what the DA would do in its first 100 days in office, obviously if it wins the election in May. eNCA's Samkele Maseko is tracking that story and joins us on eNCA lunchtime. But optimistic he's being, though. They haven't won yet, have they?
He's being very optimistic, always very optimistic. You remember how he was optimistic during the 2016 local government elections with those hung municipalities in Tshwane, Johannesburg and Nelson Mandela Bay. He's pretty much bringing back that energy for this general election this year, saying they're very optimistic. They are open to the idea of coalition governments, but they will not go into a coalition government with any political party that seeks to mobilize and to garner support through cultural differences, racism, and pushing the issue of land expropriation without compensation, saying they need an equitable partner to run this country to take it to greater prospects, but being very optimistic.
In many ways, though, the party itself is on the back foot. It's dealt with a number of scandals and issues over the past couple of months. This is also a big personal test for him. His leadership of the party is firmly in the spotlight.
Indeed, his leadership of the Democratic Alliance, particularly after their conference last year, is in the spotlight. You've got a number of DA senior leaders and former leaders who are particularly disgruntled with the leadership style of Mmusi Maimane. At some point, one of the DA leaders basically said to me, "You cannot grow to be so big and so clumsy and grow so big at all costs. You need to curtail it and have a proper growth trajectory, even if it means losing certain metros, losing certain municipalities, but in order to have a growth path that is proper and a credible leadership that can appeal to all sectors of society."
So what then is that growth trajectory in terms of the big platform that the party is campaigning on?
They are saying that they are in the running to govern Gauteng, to govern the Northwest Province, and to govern the Northern Cape Province. So they are basically having their sights firmly on those three provinces, which basically means they are looking at a growth path of about 3-4%, which would take them to about 28% when it comes to the electoral base. You remember Solim Simanga, during their manifesto launch at the Rand Stadium, he said that they are looking towards growing the DA from the 23% voter percentage they have currently to about 27%, which basically tells you that they're not so eager, or they can see themselves that they may not win the national election on themselves, and they will need a coalition government to govern Gauteng and to govern these two other provinces, where you can basically see that they are disintegrating, and the ANC, which is in leadership, particularly in the Northwest Province, is facing a greater turbulence and issues within that province after they had to recall their premier and provincial chairperson at the time, Supra Muhammad Bilo. So the Democratic Alliance firmly has their sights on three provinces: Gauteng, Northern Cape, and the Free State.
Let's just delve into one of the big issues if we can. This is a country that's been beset by load shedding over the past couple of weeks. Inevitably, it will continue. Factor into the equation the efficacy of independent power producers. You managed to speak to him about that. Set it up for me.
Interestingly, Jeremy, you've got a Democratic Alliance and an ANC leadership under Cyril Ramaphosa, whom is not so far apart when it comes to the issues of Eskom. Mmusi Maimane is speaking about unbundling Eskom into two different divisions. Cyril Ramaphosa and the government of the day is speaking about unbundling it into three different divisions. But they are saying the only difference they have is that the government of the day wants to use state-owned enterprises as a growth trajectory for the country, whilst the Democratic Alliance is against that and moves for more independent power producers, IPPs, to come into play at Eskom. Let's just listen to what he had to say about that particular issue of IPPs.
Jobs bloodbath. Eskom are holding our whole economy ransom. You try a manufacturing sector where you are out of energy for 4 hours in the day. That's unsustainable. So the choice we've got to make is whether we lose all the jobs or ultimately diversify what happens at Eskom. When I talk about municipalities being able to purchase directly from independent power producers, those are capable municipalities. So ultimately, the demand for Eskom, as far as the distribution company, will always remain, because the country isn't all just surrounded by metros. Secondly, independent power producing is about the sustainability in a climate-changing country. Ultimately, we're going to face the effects of global warming. So therefore, we have to ensure that we bring on green energy in a much more aggressive way. And thirdly, I've always advocated for reskilling of workers, and I think those workers who are currently in a coal-producing environment can be absorbed into a wind, gas, and energy. This brings about skills that aligns us with the 21st century. And therefore, lastly, I want to work with everybody that we find a solution that works for all our people.
But Mmusi, you are not providing a solution here. Who gives that workforce the necessary skills? Is it the government, or is it the current entities, your Glencore, your Exaros, your Anglo-American that controls these mines and runs them, the Guptas and their Tageta? Who gives this workforce this necessary skill?
Part of the stimulus that we've put on the table is that in the Jobs Act, we make it clear that there's a tax incentive that's designed for reskilling workers. And furthermore, when a new company comes in here to invest in gas or solar, they have to be able to be obliged to train their labor force that they'll be bringing on board. So this is a partnership that says that how can we ensure that rather than having these cumbersome seaters that sit elsewhere, let's ensure that we localize training, incentivize company for reskilling.
All right, the DA is Mmusi Maimane there speaking to political reporter Samkele Maseko. Now, some